Welcome to the latest episode of the Trojans Wired podcast. The podcast, which is an in-house production of the website Trojans Wire, we're part of the College Wire Network. There was a freight train rolling through town, and it smacked Cece Clay in the head. Believe me, believe us, believe her. If she would, she could. If she would have been able to provide analysis, writing, YouTube shows, all the great things that she does. If she would, I mean, if she could, she would. But she was just absolutely slammed with just a massive headache, just laid up, like, it'll happen. And just the
Yeah,
timing just couldn't have been worse during the Big Ten tournament. If she could have been able to do it, she would have done it. Believe us. But
yeah,
CC's beginning to feel better now. So back in the swing of things, and we're doing our bracketology preview. We will do a bracket breakdown after Selection Sunday when we get the bracket for the women's NCAA tournament. But before we get there, we're going to preview what seeds USC's going to get and what teams USC might be paired with, how the top two seed lines are going to line up, which matchups are probably better, which matchups are probably not as good. So it's our bracket breakdown preview show here on the Trojans Wired podcast. So Cece, glad you're feeling better. You can just start wherever you'd like in terms of USC's place in the bracket and the things that you'll be looking for on Selection Sunday and the selection show for the women. The men are at 3 Los Angeles time. The women are at 5. So that is when USC fans, you'll want to be able to tune in to ESPN for the selection special, 5 p.m. in LA, 8 p.m. in the East. Cece, what are you going to be looking for on the selection show?
yeah. I'm looking at the one and two lines. That's what I'm most, and a little bit of the three line. I'm really interested in how those seating placements are going to go. You know, if you want to jump right into it, first before we do that, for those of you that sent me DMs, wishing me well wishes, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I haven't been sick since before COVID, and when I say it got me, it got me. I mean, I was really out for a week and a half and could not do anything. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. I am getting back to myself now. So wanted to jump on here before Selection Sunday and go over what my thoughts are. And as we get right into it, I really believe, when I look at the quad one wins and the losses and all that kind of stuff, I don't think South Carolina is going to be the number one overall seed like Don Staley has been pushing it and trying to politic is what I think she's doing, trying to politic so she can politic her way into that number one overall position. But I do believe it's going to go to UCLA. And the reason why I believe that is because although South Carolina has 16 quad one wins, UCLA has 14 quad one wins and only two quad one losses, and both of those losses were to USC, where South Carolina has three quad one losses to different teams. So I believe that UCLA is going to get that top overall seed, and it's going to go up. UCLA will be top overall, then South Carolina, then USC, and then Texas is my top four.
All right. So, I think, obviously in terms of the jousting for prominence, positioning, whatever, it certainly feels better if you're the number one overall seed or if you're number two overall. But really, from a USC standpoint, it's a lot less important to be number two overall as opposed to number three overall. What really matters, I would think, it's not whether you're number two overall, it's what number two seed you get in your region. So let's get right into
Yeah.
that. What are the contenders? And of those contenders, which ones go into the good matchup pile? Which ones go into the tricky matchup pile? Let's just give our listeners here on our podcast a sense of what would be the better regional pairings for USC.
So if you look at if you look at how the top eight should be ordered, in my opinion, when you balance everything out, that does play a significant role in where the teams are going to go. Because just like the number one and the number three, UCLA and USC will go to Spokane. Then the number two and the number four are going to go to Birmingham, so that you have your 1, 2, 3, 4, and then your twos at number five. I have UConn. So UConn being at number five will go to Spokane, and they'll be playing UCLA. So in my opinion, and then you have six would be TCU, or those two could switch. I'm not sure yet if they're going to give TCU that number 1, 2 seed, but I think it's going to go to UConn, and then North Carolina State and Notre Dame. So that would put TCU. It would be wait, it would no UConn would go in South Carolina's region. Sorry about
So
that.
Birmingham, UConn to
Yeah,
Birmingham.
UConn to Birmingham, and then TCU or UConn to Spokane, but in UCLA's region. And then I think we're going to get either North Carolina State or Notre Dame for that in our region. And I think it's going to be North Carolina State because Notre Dame really faltered at the end of the season. So we're looking at North Carolina State as that final number two.
Okay, would you say that on the seed list, Notre Dame is ahead or behind North Carolina State? Because
Wait, I'm sorry. Yeah.
one would think that of those two ACC teams, the one that's higher stays in Birmingham, and the one that's lower has to go out to Spokane in the West. Is that a correct
Yeah,
assumption?
so no, so you have UConn and South Carolina, then you would have
In Birmingham,
TCU, yeah, to Birmingham, and then you have TCU to Spokane, right, which would be UCLA, right? And then you have North Carolina State to Spokane and Notre Dame to Birmingham. So it would be TCU would get UCLA, and then North Carolina State would get USC, right? Am I talking? Yeah.
you laid it out clearly. So
And then Notre
uh,
Dame would get Texas.
Notre Dame, Texas. So I think 10 out of 10 USC fans would take that right now
Yeah,
if
that's
that's the
that's
actual
that's
outcome.
I'm I'm being biased, and that's what I want. But when I break it down, when I look at quad one wins and losses, that's like how it really should play out. I mean, not just because, but that's how, if we're looking at wins and losses and how they're playing now versus earlier in the season, and they look at, the whole package, but a lot depends on how they're playing now. I just think that's how it should play out. Now, do politics come into play? Yes. So does UCLA get that number one overall seed? Maybe not. Maybe they'll give it to South Carolina because they're last year's champion and politics, play in it. But you got to look at it from a revenue standpoint too. So when you look at that Final Four setup, what's going to draw the most revenue, for everybody, and what's going to draw the biggest audience. So when you look at that Final Four, it would be South, in my opinion. You know, Now UConn might beat South Carolina, so that number, if it plays out right, right. So it could be UConn, UCLA, USC, and Notre Dame. If Notre Dame beats Texas, it's going to be a good Final Four, and I want it set up to be USC and UConn. That's the matchup that I want to see at the end because one, it's Page versus Juju, two, and I just think that would be the biggest draw. Do I think South Carolina and USC would be a good draw? Maybe, but they would meet in the Final Four, I think, right? I don't have my brackets in front of me, so they
Yeah,
wouldn't meet in the final.
yeah. Now,
They might, yeah.
just to be clear, South Carolina would definitely be ahead of Texas on the seed list if we compare those two because South Carolina won the rubber match. They split the regular season. South Carolina wins the SEC tournament final. We agree that South Carolina is ahead of Texas on the seed list if we're comparing those top two SEC teams.
Yeah, Texas will be, like I said, it'll be, my opinion, UCLA, South Carolina, number two, number one, um, USC, Texas.
Yeah,
So Texas will be that fourth number one seed.
fourth number one. So wouldn't that mean that Texas as the lower number one seed from the SEC, South Carolina being the higher? And look, so it's really interesting. You have the LA schools both as number one seeds, and then you have two SEC schools, South Carolina, Texas, as number one seeds. because Texas is the lower number 1 seed, wouldn't Texas be bracketed with the higher 2 seed, that being UConn? Wouldn't UConn fit in the regional with Texas and instead of South
Might.
Carolina?
They might. I'm not looking at my bracket right now, so maybe I'm
Okay.
wrong.
Okay.
But I'm just thinking that Texas is going to end up getting Notre Dame.
Hmm.
Uh,
It-
it
it-
could be, you're right. It could be South Carolina gets Notre Dame. So they put that lowest two against the number two
the S curve. I
against
don't, and I don't know
Carolina.
if they use the S curve anymore, but like that's like the old time bracketing
Yeah,
principle. So that's
yeah.
certainly an
Let me
interesting
see.
plot point. Well, let's
Let me
well
look
let's
at,
just
go ahead.
no, well, let's just get back to the comparison of teams. And you laid out the possibility that North Carolina State is going to be the 2 seed in USC's region. And again, I'm thinking if USC fans had that 2 seed, if that was the actual 2 seed, they would all sign on the dotted line. Every USC fan, if you tell them right now, we're going to get North Carolina State as the 2 seed. And hey, North Carolina State, really good program. Wes Moore, quality coach. ACC Coach of the Year, made the Final
Yep,
Four last year. None of this is to disrespect North Carolina State. Excellent program, but not quite in UConn's weight class, right? And
yeah,
probably, they've beaten Notre Dame in Raleigh on their home court where they're very tough to beat. But North Carolina State against other elite teams away from Raleigh, away from home, hasn't been nearly as imposing. And Duke handled North Carolina State very convincingly in the ACC final. It's not that NC State's chopped liver, anything but. For any Wolfpack fans who happen to be listening to our podcast, it's just when you compare NC State to a UConn and to Notre Dame on a neutral floor, USC would probably prefer North Carolina State. It's just that simple.
yeah. So here's the matchups. So UCLA won overall, South Carolina, USC, and then Texas. And then UCLA, now they're saying here, when I was going back and forth that Duke has a chance to jump up and get that number 2 seed too. So they're saying UCLA can get TCU or Duke, you know. So
Okay.
and then South Carolina would get Notre Dame, like I was saying. USC would get North Carolina State and Texas would get UConn.
That seems like the right puzzle piece fit across the board in terms of balanced brackets. Because I mean,
Yeah,
it's a long-standing bracketing principle that the weakest one seed gets the strongest two. Texas, UConn, right? Texas is the
yeah,
weakest one.
yep.
UConn's the strongest two. That lines up. That bracket math certainly follows. So, okay, we're going down the seed lines here. So let's talk about the 3 seeds, right? Because obviously the first point of focus for a number 1 seed is who's the two in my region. So North Carolina
Yeah,
State could be the two in USC's region. We don't know for sure, but that would be a good outcome for USC. However, what if the 3 seed in USC's region takes out North Carolina State and proves to be a thorny
yeah.
matchup? And
Which
and
could be Duke.
and it's worth noting, UConn, which beat USC in the Elite Eight last year, UConn was a 3. UConn
Yeah,
was a 3 seed.
yeah,
So that's an example. Like, so okay, you might get a good 2 seed, but maybe the 3 is really nasty.
yeah.
So let's deal with that. So you
So
you pointed
you
out just a
you
moment
got
ago that TCU might be the weakest 2 seed and Duke could be the strongest 3 seed. So TCU Duke would be together in UCLA's Spokane region. What about the possible 3 seed with North Carolina State as the two in a potential USC region in
well you
Spokane?
got
As
you,
we
you
as we
got
get so we're diving into the 3 line. What do you see on the 3 line in this bracketology preview before Selection Sunday?
so Duke, LSU, Oklahoma, and maybe Ole Miss as a 3 seed. Maybe, I'm not, I don't know. You know what I mean? But I know that or Kansas State is another one that could be a 3, but TCU or Duke for sure, LSU and Oklahoma will be a 3 seed.
Okay.
Definitely.
let's talk
And
LSU.
then
That's
you
Kim
got Baylor.
Mulkey.
Baylor will probably be a 3 seed too. So there you have Baylor, Oklahoma, LSU, TCU, or Duke.
All right, let's talk Kim Mulkey because national championship coach, elite program. Flaujae Johnson has been out recently, but I'm thinking she's expected to be available for the NCAA tournament. Is that
Her
is
and
that
Anissa.
a
Yeah,
correct
her.
assumption?
Yep, her and Anissa. She got hurt during the tournament too, so they both sat out during the
Tomorrow.
tournament. Yeah, and what's interesting about that is they almost beat Texas without both of them. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So
Tough game.
go figure.
SEC
Yeah.
semis. Yes.
hmm So
Yeah.
with those two healthy, they're going to be a strong number 3 seed.
And so that could be really the recurrence of what happened last year with USC and UConn. USC getting the nasty three, maybe the
Yeah.
manageable two, but the nasty three. You could have LSU beating NC State and becoming the Elite Eight opponent for USC as the 3 seed. So let's
Oklahoma,
weigh and let's weigh and compare.
Oklahoma.
So let's weigh and compare 3 seeds. So you have potentially Duke as a 3, LSU as a 3, Oklahoma as a 3, Kansas State or
And
Baylor
Baylor.
as a 3. Of those potential 3 seeds, which one would you not mind having in USC's region? Which ones would you want to say, stay out of our region?
That's a tough call because of the matchups. When I'm thinking of matchups, like Oklahoma, they're they're a transition. Even though they got Reagan Beers, they got a fantastic big in Reagan Beers, but they're a transition team. They're, I think, number one nationally in scoring, so they like to go, but they don't shoot a lot of threes. They don't shoot a lot of good threes. So you have Oklahoma, and then you have Baylor, who took USC to the wire last year in that Sweet 16 game, and then LSU. LSU is always LSU with Kim Mulkey. You just never know what you're going to get, and so I don't know. When I look at the 4 line compared to the 3 line, I'm almost more nervous about the 4 line than the 3 line.
Talk to me about that. Talk to us about that.
I just think that when you look at matchups, does their style of play match up? I look at who matches up as far as style of play for USC. And normally we want to play a team that doesn't like transition ball. We want to play a team that likes to slow it down and run half court offense and is not that very good defensively, because we do opposite of what they like to do, right? And so we'll get them out of their game. If we're playing transition with transition, and if we're playing teams that are guard heavy, that can dribble drive, that'll hurt us because we're not a good dribble drive defensive team. So we want to stay away from teams with good, dribble drive guards, and we'd rather play with teams that play, that play in the half court offense type of set. So when you look at Oklahoma, they like to run. When you look at Baylor, they like to run. When you look at, well, oh, I forgot about Ohio State. Ohio State could be a 3-2, and Maryland. So I mean, there's a lot of teams that can come and be a number 3, but the best matchup for us on that 3 line, to
Okay,
be
but you
honest,
okay, but you alluded to some potential number 4 seeds might scare you more than number 3s. So of the on the 4 line, which teams stand out as potential threats for USC in the Sweet 16?
say Oklahoma and LSU scare
Now,
me the most.
I would think LSU probably is still a 3, but maybe Oklahoma would be more likely to drop to a 4. Would you say?
Maybe, it just depends. I don't know what the committee's going to do, and I haven't been paying attention because I've been out of it. But when I'm
Yeah.
looking at stats and so on and so forth, they could drop to a 4. Um, I don't know. It's going to be tough. There's a lot of it's not like there's 3 good teams that are going to be in the field. There's a lot of good teams that play different types of ball, and it's all about matchups. So I just hope the committee gets it right in the way they do the matchups.
Do you have a general preference beyond specific teams? Do you want to play an SEC team in the Sweet 16? Do you want to play a Big 12 team? Just having a general feel for
Well, the Big
what the
12,
conferences did during the regular season. Does that contain any weight, relevance whatsoever?
give me a Big 12 team, over the SEC. The SEC, I would want to play last. I'd rather play Big 12 or ACC competition because to me those were the two weakest conferences. SC is physical, SE or SEC. SEC is physical, and they're a lot of those teams are good defensively, whereas the Big 12 and the ACC aren't as physical. And to me, the only really good defensive team out of those two is Duke, out of the ACC. So, you know, um, it's going to be interesting. Do I think that if they put North Carolina as a two and Oklahoma as a three, I don't know. Maybe we get Kansas State as the four. I don't know what they're going to do with Kansas State because Aoki Lee is back. Um, it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. And I want to see the number one, who's ever the number one overall. I want to see what that bracket looks like too. How much they're going to favor that team. So, because I would really like to see, a TCU UCLA matchup. Not because of Sedona Prince, because yeah, Sedona Prince is 6'7", but she tends to foul a lot, so that's going to be trouble for them. But they can shoot the three, and I don't know how UCLA is going to defend against that. And Haley Van Lith versus Kiki Rice, I would like to see that matchup.
Yeah, so we've pretty much talked out USC's potential Sweet 16 and Elite Eight opponents. Now let's get in. You began to get into that other conversation, and let's dive into that. So, like, which opponents could give UCLA trouble? Which opponents could give the other number one seeds trouble? And while I think it would be great for women's basketball if we do have a heavyweight Final Four, because if we do have a heavyweight Final Four, that means USC's part of it. So like, bring on USC versus South Carolina, or maybe USC UCLA part four. But if we don't get that, and if USC is able to get to the Final Four, someone else knocks off another number one seed, that gives USC a potentially better national semifinal bracket. So in terms of opponents that could give UCLA trouble, you've already identified TCU. When we look at other potential teams in a potential UCLA region. Any idea of which other number two seeds? Like, it could be NC State and USC's region, but what if NC State was the two in UCLA's region? What if Oklahoma is the three in UCLA's region? What about styles of play against UCLA and maybe giving the Bruins a tougher bracket path?
I think you said it. Oklahoma will give UCLA a a a tough game because of Reagan Beer. She can hold her own against Lauren Betts, and also because they like to run. And then also I think Notre Dame would give UCLA a good game because of Hidalgo and Olivia Miles. Their guard play is far better than UCLA's. Um, UConn, I think, would give UCLA a rough go of it. And those are my top three.
And
And
then
I think Tennessee has been faltering a bit, but I'm really interested to see where Tennessee is placed and where what seeding they get because they're going to be a tough out too. I think you're going to have to scout Tennessee really really well and understand their players' tendencies because they go what 15 deep, so every 2 minutes they're subbing in and out. I mean, that's just something you can't get used to. So. But I think Oklahoma, Notre Dame, UConn will be tough matchups for UCLA because of style of play.
So we would agree that Tennessee is a number four seed that USC would want to avoid, and it would be great if Tennessee got thrown into UCLA's Sweet 16 bracket.
Yeah, but I honestly think Tennessee would be a 5 seed. I don't think they'll be a 4 seed. I think they'll be a five
Okay.
seed.
Okay. Yeah, but of course that puts them still in that 4-5 game and as a
Yeah,
potential Sweet 16 opponent. So like USC would want to have nothing to do with the fifth seeded Vols if
yeah.
it came to that. And just building on your point, would rather play a Big 12 team than an SEC team in the Sweet 16. And let's not play an SEC team until the Elite Eight at the earliest, and of course preferably not at all if possible.
Final four.
So. So that's another
I think if the
bracket
committee
pick.
sets it up right, if they do it right, they'll have it set up to where, you know, it's no matter what, it's either going to be UConn versus somebody in a final or SEC Big Ten in a final.
And the point I want to just reiterate, let's give everybody as few regular season rematches as possible. And I know you can't do that across the board because so many of the top teams play each other, and
Yeah.
and and that's a good thing. Like the top teams should be playing each other in non-conference play. You want to create these made-for-TV showcases to capitalize on the improved popularity of women's basketball on television. So, like, that's a good thing. Want to be clear about that. But to the extent that it's possible, let's try to create fewer rematches in the Elite Eight, and then let's get those rematches at the Final Four in Tampa. All right, winding things down, Cece. Any other bracket notes? Um, the bubble. What about USC's 8 versus 9 potential opponent in the second round at Galen Center on the first weekend of the NCAA tournament, or any other notes in terms of whether it's the Big Ten, whether it's just the overall seed list, the overall seed lines, any other bracket bits that we haven't yet covered that we want to get on the show here.
I'm interested to see where Michigan and where Iowa is going to be seated. I think, Iowa and Michigan might be a little bit higher than Iowa. Iowa will be one of those 8 or 9 seeded teams. And Iowa's playing really good right now. And I think they're going to be a tough out in the first 2 rounds for anybody. So I'm interested to see where they go. And I'm interested to see where Michigan goes, what region they go in, because they're a tough out too. Um, they're playing a lot better now than they were at the beginning of the season. They have a little bit more chemistry. And so I think that they're going to be a tough out as well. But I'm really interested to see who Iowa matches up with on that 8-9 line, for their first matchup.
All right, Cece. So, for everyone listening to or also watching this podcast, we're going to do our NCAA tournament bracket breakdown, the review of the bracket, looking at USC's bracket, looking at the whole bracket. We'll probably do that Monday night. But Cece, you have a special announcement about what you're going to be doing on Selection Sunday. So tell everybody about that. And of course, again, you've been laid up for a week and a half with just this freight train 18 wheeler just knocking you flat. Now you're ready to get back into the game on Substack and YouTube. So tell people what
Yeah.
you have planned for your two multimedia offerings, and then what you're going to be doing on Selection Sunday afternoon.
Yeah. So Selection Sunday, I will be watching the USC selection show from USC. And then also, I do have a Substack coming out tomorrow, but it's on Kennedy Smith. I have been writing a piece on her as much as I can while I've been sick. So I'll be releasing that tomorrow. And then probably Monday, I'll be doing a YouTube show, like a single podcast other than our podcast, on breaking down the brackets. So, and talking more about that as in our podcast. So look forward to that. And hopefully I'll be 100% for all of it. Who knows? Pray for me. I'm on different meds now, so pray for me. Man, I don't even want to discuss what I've been through.
We don't have to, but we're glad you seem to be past the worst of it. Not yet 100%, but past the worst of it. We're very glad
Yeah,
for that. It's just like this USC team. Hit your stride when the NCAA
yeah,
tournament comes. That's the goal for
yeah,
them. That's the goal for you, CC. So we're back. We're
yeah.
glad that you're back, and we look forward to our bracket breakdown early next week. Selection Sunday, it's Christmas for college basketball fans.
Yeah, and I'll
One
be
of the
more
highlights
prepared.
of the year.
Yeah, I'll be more prepared when we do our other podcast. I mean, I'll actually have the bracket up and all that kind of stuff. I just don't have it up because I wasn't prepared. You know, I just wanted to get out here and shout out a little bit about what I think the top 8 seeds will be, and then give my opinion on that, and then go from there.
Shaking
So, and
off the
to say
rust.
hi to everybody, and to say hi to everybody. Hey, I'm alive. I'm good. You know, so not at 100% yet, but almost there.
After a 2 week layoff, any basketball player, any athlete's rusty, so that is just part of the deal. But just like, just seeing a great performer return to the court, that's inspiration enough for today. And we know that you're going to ramp it up with Selection Sunday and the NCAA tournament. All right, Cece, welcome back. Glad you're better, and
Thank
we're
you.
looking forward to our bracket breakdown early next week after the brackets are revealed for the 2025 Women's NCAA Tournament. Thanks for listening to Trojans Wired. I'm Matt Zemek. We'll see you next time.
Right on.